Clara Vale had 48 hours to marry the man who'd threatened to kill her or lose everything she'd ever loved. The ink on her husband's death certificate was still wet when his brother walked into her parlor with a forged will and a smile that promised ownership. She wasn't being rescued, she was being collected. And in a frontier town where women were property and the law belonged to whoever bought it first, Clara realized the trap had been set long before her husband's body went cold. If you want to see how far Clara makes it, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's dive in. The clock on the mantel read 2:30 when Clara heard the horses. She didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. In the 3 days since they'd buried Thomas, she'd learned to recognize the sound of boots that walked like they owned the ground beneath them. Heavy, deliberate. The kind of footsteps that didn't bother with courtesy, because courtesy was for people who had to ask permission. She set down the cup she'd been holding, coffee gone cold an hour ago, and smoothed her black skirts. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. Everything else about her felt like it was coming apart at the seams, but her hands stayed calm. The knock came hard enough to rattle the door frame. "Mrs. Vale." The voice belonged to Samuel Garrett, the town lawyer. "I need a moment of your time." Clara crossed the small parlor and opened the door just wide enough to see him. Garrett stood on her porch in his Sunday suit, hat in hand, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Behind him, 2 other men waited on horseback, Marcus Vale and Deputy Holm. Marcus sat his horse like he was posing for a portrait, back straight, jaw set. He didn't look at her, just stared at some fixed point above her head like she was furniture. Thomas's brother, 6 years younger, twice as mean, and currently acting like he owned the place. Because according to the paper Garrett was holding, he did. "What do you want, Mr. Garrett?" "May I come in?" "You may not." Garrett's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Mrs. Vale, this concerns your late husband's estate. It would be better discussed inside." "Then it can wait until a decent hour." "I'm afraid it cannot." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd known this was coming, had felt it in the way people had looked at her at the funeral, in the whispered conversations that stopped when she walked past. Thomas had died 3 days ago when his horse threw him on the North Trail, snapped his neck clean. The doctor said he wouldn't have felt anything. Clara wasn't sure she believed that. Thomas had felt everything too deeply. Joy, anger, fear. He'd worn every emotion where everyone could see it. It was what had made him easy to love and impossible to save. "Then say what you came to say." Garrett glanced back at Marcus, who was still studying that invisible point above her head. The deputy had dismounted and was standing close enough to the porch that Clara could smell the tobacco on his coat. "Your husband left a will," Garrett said. "I know. We made it together 2 years ago." "Not that will. A new one. Dated 6 weeks ago." The cold thing in her stomach spread. "That's impossible. Thomas would have told me." "Nevertheless, it exists. Properly witnessed, properly filed. In it, he makes provisions for his estate in the event of his death." Clara's fingers tightened on the doorframe. "What provisions?" "The house, the land, the livestock. Everything passes to his brother Marcus, with one condition." Garrett paused, and in that pause Clara heard the trap snap shut. "That Marcus marry you within 1 week of Thomas's death to ensure your protection and the preservation of the family name." The world tilted sideways. "You're joking." "I am not. Thomas would never, he wouldn't do that to me." "The will is legal and binding, Mrs. Vale. I've reviewed it myself. If you refuse the marriage, you forfeit all claim to the property. You'll have 48 hours to vacate the premises." Clara looked past Garrett to Marcus, who had finally deigned to meet her eyes. He wasn't smiling, but there was something in his face that made her skin crawl. Satisfaction, maybe. Or hunger. "This is insane," she said. "You can't force me to marry someone." "No one's forcing anything," Garrett said, but his voice said different. "You have a choice. Marry Marcus and maintain your home and security, or refuse and leave with nothing. Those are your options." "Those aren't options, that's extortion." "That's the law, ma'am." Clara felt the laugh building in her chest before she could stop it. It came out sharp and bitter. "The law. Right. The same law that says a woman can't own property without a husband. The same law that says I'm chattel to be passed around like livestock." "Mrs. Vale, Get off my porch. Garrett didn't move. You have until Friday at noon to make your decision. After that, the property reverts to Marcus regardless, and you'll be removed. Removed? Clara tasted the word. It was clean, polite. It didn't sound anything like what it meant, dragged out of her home by armed men while the whole town watched. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was softer than his brother's had been, with a smoothness that made Clara think of oil on water. This doesn't have to be difficult, Clara. Thomas wanted you taken care of. That's all this is. She looked at him, really looked, saw the way he sat his horse, the way his hand rested on his thigh, close to where his gun hung, the way he watched her like she was something he'd already purchased and was just waiting to collect. If Thomas wanted me taken care of, she said quietly, he wouldn't have done this. Thomas was sick, Marcus said. At the end, not in his right mind. He was fine 6 weeks ago. Was he? Marcus tilted his head. You sure about that? Because I remember him seeming mighty confused last time I saw him, forgetting things, getting lost on trails he'd ridden 100 times. Clara's hands weren't steady anymore. You're lying. Am I? Marcus smiled then, and it was nothing like Thomas's smile. Garrett, show her the medical statement. The lawyer pulled another paper from his jacket. Dr. Morrison documented several concerning symptoms in the weeks before Thomas's death. Confusion, memory loss, erratic behavior. It's all here. Morrison's a drunk. He's still a licensed physician, and his testimony supports the will's validity. Clara felt the walls closing in. This wasn't random. This wasn't grief making Marcus opportunistic. This was planned, calculated, every piece laid out in advance like a chess game she hadn't known she was playing. I need to see the will, she said, and the medical records, all of it. Of course. Garrett held out both documents. You're welcome to review them with your own counsel. I don't have counsel. Then I'd suggest you find some, quickly. Clara took the papers. Her hand shook now, and she didn't try to hide it. Let them see. Let them think she was breaking. 48 hours, Garrett said. Friday at noon. I'll need your answer then. He turned and walked back to his horse. The deputy followed. Marcus stayed a moment longer, looking at Clara like he was memorizing her face. It'll be easier if you just say yes, he said. Fighting only makes things harder. Get off my property. It's not your property, Clara. Not anymore. But it could be. All you have to do is be reasonable. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. For a long moment she stood there with her forehead pressed against the wood, listening to the horses leave. When the sound faded, the silence that replaced it was so complete it felt like suffocation. The papers in her hand crinkled. She looked down at them, forcing herself to focus on the words instead of the scream building in her throat. Last will and testament of Thomas James Vale. The handwriting looked like Thomas's. The signature matched, but something about it felt wrong in a way she couldn't name, like a photograph that was technically correct but somehow off. The angle wrong. The lighting strange. She moved to the kitchen table and spread the papers out. Read through them once, then again. The language was dense, full of legal terms she barely understood, but the core message was clear enough. Everything Thomas owned now belonged to Marcus, unless she married him. To ensure the protection and proper care of my beloved wife, Clara Elizabeth Vale, I hereby decree that all property, holdings, and assets shall pass to my brother Marcus Theodore Vale, with the express condition that he enter into lawful marriage with the aforementioned Clara Elizabeth Vale within 1 week of my death, thereby preserving the family name and maintaining her security and station. Clara's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing the tears back. Crying wouldn't help. Crying was what they expected, what they wanted. She looked at the date, 6 weeks ago, a Tuesday. She remembered that day. Thomas had gone to town for supplies. Came back late, looking tired. They'd eaten dinner in near silence because Clara had been angry about something. She couldn't even remember what now, some small thing that had felt important at the time. He hadn't mentioned a will, hadn't mentioned feeling sick or confused, hadn't mentioned his brother. But Marcus had been in town that day. She remembered because Thomas had mentioned seeing him at the general store. Said Marcus was asking about cattle prices. Clara's stomach turned. The medical report was brief. Dr. Morrison's signature scrawled at the bottom like an afterthought. Patient presents with episodes of confusion and memory impairment. Recommendation: legal affairs be settled promptly in case of further decline. It was dated the same day as the will. Too neat, too convenient. Clara stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was the color of old bruises. Storm coming. She could smell it in the air, that electric tang that meant lightning and heavy rain. The horses in the corral shifted restlessly, sensing it too. Thomas had loved storms. Used to stand on the porch and watch them roll in, completely at peace while thunder cracked the sky open. Clara had never understood it. Storms made her nervous. All that raw power with nowhere to go but down. She pressed her hand against the glass. It was cold enough to sting. 48 hours. 2 days to decide between marrying a man she despised or losing everything. Except it wasn't really a choice, was it? Not when the alternative was being thrown out with nothing. Not when the law was written by men for men. And women like her were just variables in an equation someone else controlled. She thought about the town, about who might help. The list was depressingly short. Reverend Walsh? Maybe, but he was old and scared of his own shadow. He'd offer prayers and sympathy and absolutely nothing useful. The other women? Most of them were in the same position Clara was, one man away from destitution. They'd commiserate over coffee and then go home grateful it wasn't happening to them. The banker? He'd already transferred the accounts to Marcus's name. She'd checked yesterday, walked into the bank and asked to withdraw money for the funeral expenses. And Mr. Fletcher had looked at her like she'd asked him to rob his own safe. The accounts are frozen pending resolution of the estate, Mrs. Vale. I'm sure you understand. She'd understood perfectly. Clara turned away from the window and looked at her home. The house Thomas had built with his own hands. Every board, every nail. She could still see him in it, the uneven floorboard by the bedroom door he'd never gotten around to fixing, the kitchen shelf that sat slightly crooked because he'd measured wrong and been too proud to tear it down and start over. 2 years they'd had here. 2 good years after 5 hard ones in town, living in a boarding house and saving every penny. Thomas working dawn to dusk at the lumber mill, Clara taking in sewing. Both of them dreaming of land and space and something that belonged to them. And now it was gone. No, not gone. Stolen. The anger came then, hot and clean. It burned through the fear and the disbelief and settled into something solid she could actually use. She wasn't going to let this happen. Clara grabbed her shawl and headed for the door. The storm was closer now, the first drops of rain starting to fall, but she didn't care. She needed to move, to do something other than stand in this house waiting for the walls to close in. The walk to town took 20 minutes at a fast pace. By the time she reached Main Street, her skirts were soaked and her hair was plastered to her face. She didn't slow down. The lawyer's office was above the dry goods store. Clara took the stairs 2 at a time and pushed through the door without knocking. Garrett looked up from his desk, startled. Mrs. Vale, I didn't expect— This will is fake, he blinked. Excuse me? You heard me? It's a forgery. Thomas never wrote this. Mrs. Vale, I understand you're upset, but nothing. Thomas would never cut me out of his own will, and he certainly wouldn't marry me off to his brother like some kind of livestock trade. Garrett stood slowly. The will has been validated. Thomas's signature can be forged. The witnesses can be bought. Mrs. Vale. Garrett's voice hardened. I know this is difficult, but making wild accusations won't change the facts. The will is legal. It was properly executed, properly witnessed, and properly filed. If you want to contest it, you're welcome to hire your own attorney and file a challenge. But I'll warn you now, that process takes months, and you don't have months. You have 2 days. Clara felt her nails dig into her palms. Who were the witnesses? I'm not at liberty to— Who were the witnesses? Garrett sighed, pulled a file from his desk and flipped it open. Marcus Vale and Deputy Holm. Of course. So the man who benefits from the will and the deputy in his pocket are the ones who verified it. And you don't see a problem with that? The law doesn't require witnesses to be impartial, Mrs. Vale. Only present and of sound mind. This is insane. This is legal. And if you continue to make unfounded accusations, you may find yourself facing slander charges in addition to eviction. The threat hung in the air between them. Clara stared at Garrett, seeing him clearly for the first time. He wasn't conflicted. wasn't uncomfortable. He was part of it. Maybe not the architect, but definitely a willing participant. "How much did he pay you?" she asked quietly. "Get out of my office." "How much, Garrett? What's the going rate for selling out a widow?" His face flushed. "I said get out." "For what? You'll have me arrested?" "For what exactly? Asking questions?" "For trespassing. You're on private property and you've been asked to leave." Clara laughed. It came out harsh and jagged. "Right, of course. Can't have a woman asking uncomfortable questions. Much easier to just threaten her into silence." She turned and walked out before he could respond. The door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the frame. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets. Clara stood on the landing, breathing hard, watching water pour off the roof in a solid curtain. Her dress was ruined. Her hair was a disaster. She probably looked half mad. She felt half mad. 48 hours. She went down the stairs and started walking. Not home. She couldn't face that empty house yet. Not anywhere in particular, just moving because standing still felt like giving up. The town was mostly empty. Smart people were inside waiting out the storm. Clara walked down Main Street past the general store, the blacksmith, the church. Everything closed. Everything dark. Except the saloon. She stopped, looked at it. The Dusty Rose wasn't the kind of place respectable women went. It was where men drank away their wages and played cards until dawn, where fights broke out most Saturday nights and the sheriff had to drag someone to jail for cooling off. Clara pushed through the doors. The inside was dim and smelled like whiskey and tobacco. A handful of men sat at tables, cards in hand, looking up when she entered. The bartender, a thick-necked man named Sullivan, froze with a glass halfway to the shelf. "Mrs. Vale?" he said. "You lost?" "I need a drink." "Ma'am, this isn't really... I know what this is, and I know I'm not supposed to be here. But I'm here anyway, and I'm asking for a drink. You going to serve me or not?" Sullivan looked at the other men. One of them shrugged. "Whiskey," Clara said. "The good stuff, not whatever you water down for the drifters." Sullivan poured, slid the glass across the bar. Clara picked it up and drank it in one swallow. It burned all the way down and brought tears to her eyes, but she didn't cough. "Another." "Mrs. Vale, another." He poured. This one she sipped, letting it warm her from the inside out. Her hands had started shaking again. She gripped the glass tighter, willing them to stop. "You all right, ma'am?" This from one of the card players. She didn't recognize him. Young guy, maybe 20, with a farmer's build and a kind face. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Clara laughed, set the glass down harder than she meant to. "You know what? You're right. I'm not fine. I'm about as far from fine as a person can get. But that's not really your problem, is it?" The kid shifted. "Didn't mean nothing by it." "I know." Clara closed her eyes. "I'm sorry. That was rude. Forget it." She opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked. He had the kind of face that hadn't learned to hide things yet. Everything showed. Concern, curiosity, awkwardness. "You ever feel trapped?" she asked. He blinked. "Ma'am?" "Like no matter what you do, you're gonna lose. Like the game's rigged and everyone knows it but you." The kid thought about it. "I guess, sometimes, when the crops fail or the bank comes calling, yeah, I guess I know what that feels like." "What do you do when you feel that way?" He shrugged. "Keep going. What else can you do?" Clara picked up her glass, drained it. What else indeed? The door opened behind her, bringing in a gust of wind and rain. She didn't turn around. Didn't care who it was. "Clara Vale." The voice was unfamiliar. Male, but not local. The accent was different. Eastern, maybe. "I was hoping I'd find you." She turned. The man standing in the doorway was tall, rangy, with dark hair plastered to his head from the rain. He wore a duster that had seen better days and carried himself like someone who'd spent more time on the trail than in town. His eyes were the color of slate, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her step back. "Do I know you?" she asked. "No, ma'am. But I know you. Or I know your situation, anyway." He crossed to the bar, water dripping off him with every step. "Cole Maddox. And I think we might be able to help each other." Clara felt every instinct screaming danger. I don't need help. With all due respect, Mrs. Vale, I think you do. I know about the will, I know about Marcus, and I know you've got about 46 hours to figure out how to stop him. How do you know that? Because I make it my business to know things, especially when they involve men like Marcus Vale. Sullivan had stopped pretending to clean glasses. The card players were watching openly now. Clara kept her voice low. What do you want? Like I said, to help each other. You need a way out of an impossible situation. I need... He paused, smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Let's just say I have unfinished business with Marcus. Business that involves making sure he doesn't get what he wants. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. You don't know me from Adam. But here's the thing, Mrs. Vale. You don't have a lot of options right now. You can marry Marcus and spend the rest of your life wondering when he's going to decide you're more trouble than you're worth. You can refuse and lose everything, or... He leaned against the bar. You can let me help you disappear. Disappear. Leave. Tonight. I've got horses, supplies, a route that'll get you clear of Vale territory before anyone knows you're gone. By the time Friday comes around, you'll be 300 miles away, starting over. Clara's heart was pounding. That's insane. Maybe, but it's better than the alternative. I don't even know you. No, you don't, but you know Marcus, you know Garrett. You know how this ends if you stay. He straightened. I'm leaving in 2 hours. If you want out, meet me at the North Trail crossing. If you don't, then I wish you luck with your new husband. He turned and walked out before she could respond. Clara stood there, whiskey burning in her stomach, mind racing. 46 hours. She looked at Sullivan. That man, you know him. Never seen him before tonight. Anyone else? The card players shook their heads. Of course not. Clara left money on the bar and walked out into the rain. It was coming down so hard now she could barely see 10 feet in front of her. Lightning cracked the sky, close enough to feel the thunder in her chest. 2 hours. She started walking home, her mind turning over possibilities, discarding them, circling back. Cole Maddox could be exactly what he claimed, someone with a grudge against Marcus willing to help her escape. Or he could be worse than Marcus, a con man, a killer, someone who saw a desperate woman and smelled opportunity. But he was right about one thing. She didn't have options. The house was dark when she got there. Clara lit a lamp and stood in the kitchen, dripping on the floor Thomas had laid, looking at the home they'd built together. If she left, she'd never see it again. If she stayed, it wouldn't be hers anyway. She thought about Thomas, about what he would want her to do. But the Thomas she knew wouldn't have written that will, wouldn't have set this trap. So maybe what he wanted didn't matter anymore because the man in the ground wasn't the man she'd married. Or maybe he'd been changed, coerced, forced. Clara didn't know. And she was out of time to figure it out. She went to the bedroom and pulled out a travel bag, started packing, practical things, a change of clothes. Her mother's locket, the money she'd saved from sewing work hidden in a tin under the floorboard. It wasn't much, $30 and change, but it was hers. She changed out of her wet dress into something warmer, sturdy boots, a jacket that had been Thomas's. It smelled like him still, wood smoke and pine. Clara closed her eyes, breathed it in. I'm sorry, she whispered to the empty room. I don't know what else to do. The house didn't answer. She left the lamp burning, let anyone who came looking think she was still there. Then she slipped out the back door into the storm. The North Trail crossing was a 20-minute walk in good weather. In this, it took twice that. Clara kept her head down against the rain, following the path by memory more than sight. Lightning showed her the way in brief, brilliant flashes. She was soaked through by the time she reached the crossing. No one was there. Clara stood under a massive pine, trying to get some shelter from the rain, and waited. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he'd never meant it in the first place. Maybe this whole thing was a test, and Marcus was watching from somewhere in the dark, waiting to see if she'd run. Then she heard horses. 2 of them, coming up the trail at a careful pace. She saw the shapes first, then the man leading them as lightning lit up the world. Cole Maddox. He pulled up beside her, holding the reins of both horses. Wasn't sure you'd come. I'm not sure I should have. Probably not. But here we are. He held out the reins of the second horse. You know how to ride? Yes? Good. We've got hard ground to cover before sunrise. Clara took the reins. The horse was solid under her hand, warm and real. Last chance to turn back. Last chance to go home and accept what was coming. She thought about Marcus's smile, about Garrett's threats, about a life spent trapped in a cage made of law and custom and male authority. Clara pulled herself into the saddle. Where are we going? Cole smiled. Anywhere but here. He kicked his horse into motion. Clara followed. Behind them, the town disappeared into the storm. Ahead, there was only darkness and rain and the unknown. But for the first time in 3 days, Clara felt something other than fear. She felt like she was moving, and moving meant alive. They rode hard for the first hour, putting distance between themselves and the town. The storm worked in their favor. Anyone tracking them would lose the trail in minutes. Clara kept her head down and followed Cole's lead, trusting the horse beneath her more than the man ahead. When the rain finally started to ease, Cole slowed his pace. He glanced back at her, water streaming off his hat brim. You all right? Clara's legs were cramping and her hands felt frozen around the reins, but she nodded. I'm fine. We'll stop soon. There's a line shack about 2 miles north. We can dry out, get warm. How do you know about a line shack out here? I know a lot of things. He turned back to the trail. Used to run cattle through this territory. Long time ago. Clara studied his back. The way he sat his horse, the easy confidence in unfamiliar terrain. He didn't move like a drifter. More like someone who'd been born in the saddle and never quite left it. What's your real business with Marcus? She asked. Told you. Unfinished. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now. Clara felt irritation flare. I just left everything I own because of you. I think I deserve better than cryptic non-answers. Cole reined in his horse so suddenly that Clara almost rode past him. He turned in the saddle to face her, and the look in his eyes made her regret pushing. You left because you had no choice, he said quietly. Not because of me. I just gave you an option you didn't have before. You want to know about Marcus and me? Fine. He killed someone I cared about, took something that didn't belong to him, and I've been waiting 3 years to make him pay for it. That clear enough? Who did he kill? Someone who trusted the wrong person. He kicked his horse forward again. Now stop talking. Sound carries at night, even in rain. Clara bit back her response and followed. The line shack was barely standing. 1 room, dirt floor, a roof that had more holes than shingles. But it was shelter, and after 2 hours in the storm, Clara would have been grateful for a cave. Cole dismounted and led both horses under an overhang that might have once been a lean-to. Clara slid out of the saddle on legs that didn't want to hold her and leaned against the wall while he secured the animals. Inside, he said. Get out of those wet clothes before you freeze. The shack smelled like mildew and rot. Clara felt her way through the darkness until she found a wall and slid down it, too tired to care about the dirt. She heard Cole moving around, then the scratch of a match. Light flared. He'd found a stub of candle on a shelf. In the flickering glow, she got her first good look at him. Younger than she'd thought. Maybe 30. Hard features, the kind that came from living rough. A scar along his jaw that looked like it had been left by a knife. His eyes were calculating as he studied the room, already planning their next move. There's a blanket in my saddlebag, he said. It's dry. Wrap up in it. What about you? I'll manage. Clara pushed herself up and went back outside. Her fingers were clumsy with cold as she dug through his bag, but she found the blanket, rough wool, smelling faintly of horse and leather. She brought it back inside and stood there shivering, suddenly aware of how alone they were. Cole had his back to her, working on building a fire in what was left of the hearth. He'd taken off his duster and was wringing water out of it with methodical efficiency. Turn around, Clara said. He didn't. I'm not looking. I don't care. Turn around. He sighed, but did as she asked. Clara peeled off her jacket and the dress underneath. Her chemise was soaked through, but she left it on. There were limits to practicality. She wrapped the blanket around herself and sat back down against the wall. All right. Cole turned back. If he noticed her state of undress, he didn't show it. He'd gotten a small fire going, more smoke than flame, but it was warmth. We'll stay here until first light, he said. Then we move again. Where are we going? East. There's a mining town called Silver Ridge, about 40 miles from here. We can catch a stage from there. To where? Does it matter? Clara pulled the blanket tighter. Yes, it matters. I just walked away from my entire life. I'd like to know where I'm walking to. Cole sat down across from her, his back against the opposite wall. The fire cast shadows across his face, making him look older. Denver eventually, big city, easy to disappear. You can start over there. You seem very sure about all this. I've done it before. Run from things? Start it over. He stretched his legs out, crossing them at the ankle. Look, Mrs. Vale, Clara. If we're running for our lives together, you can call me Clara. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Clara, I know this isn't ideal. I know you don't trust me. Hell, you shouldn't trust me. But right now, I'm all you've got. So we can either work together and both get what we want, or we can fight each other and make this harder than it needs to be. And what is it you want exactly? I told you, to make sure Marcus doesn't get what he wants. Which is? You, the land, whatever he's really after. Men like Marcus, it's never about just one thing. There's always another angle. Clara thought about that. You think the will is fake. I know it is. How? Because I watched him forge it. The words hung in the air between them. Clara stared at him, trying to make sense of what she'd just heard. You what? Cole met her eyes. 6 weeks ago, I was in town, staying at the boarding house, keeping my head down, watching Marcus. He met with Garrett at the saloon. They were drunk, talking loud. I heard them planning it, how they'd write a new will, get Morrison to sign off on medical papers, make it all look legal. Marcus was bragging about how easy it would be, how you'd never question it. Clara's hands clenched in the blanket. You knew. All this time, you knew he was setting a trap, and you didn't warn me? I didn't know you, and I wasn't here to save you. I was here to destroy him. By using me. By giving you a way out. Look, I'm not claiming to be a hero here. I've got my own reasons for wanting Marcus to lose. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong about what he's doing, or what'll happen to you if you go back. Clara wanted to be angry, should have been furious. But the exhaustion was catching up with her, and under the anger was something worse, relief that someone else knew the truth, that she wasn't crazy for thinking the will felt wrong. Why would he do this? She asked quietly. Thomas's brother, why would he do this? You really want to know what I think? Yes. Cole poked at the fire with a stick. I think Thomas had something Marcus wanted, and I think Marcus got tired of waiting for him to die naturally. Horse accidents happen, especially when someone loosens the cinch strap before a ride. The world tilted. You're saying Marcus killed him? I'm saying it's suspicious. Thomas was a good horseman, from what I heard. Doesn't make sense he'd get thrown like that unless something was wrong with the saddle. You don't know that. No, I don't. But I know Marcus, and I know what he's capable of. Clara closed her eyes, tried to breathe through the nausea rising in her throat. If Cole was right, if Marcus had killed Thomas, then everything that came after was worse than she'd thought. Not just theft. Murder. I can't prove any of it, Cole said. That's why I'm not going to the law. Even if there was a sheriff worth a damn in this territory, and there isn't, Marcus has enough money to buy his way out of anything. The only way to stop him is to take away what he wants most. Which is power, control, the satisfaction of winning. Cole's voice had gone hard. Men like Marcus, they don't just want things. They want to own them, dominate them. You marrying him wouldn't have been about love or even convenience. It would have been about proving he could make you do it. Clara opened her eyes. You really hate him. I have cause. The person he killed. Who was it? For a long moment, Cole didn't answer. The fire crackled. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving only the drip of water from the eaves. My sister, he said finally. Sarah. She worked as a seamstress in the next town over. Marcus took a liking to her, started courting her, if you can call it that. Bought her things, made promises. She thought he was going to marry her. His jaw tightened. Then she got pregnant, and suddenly Marcus didn't know her anymore. Told people she was lying, that the baby couldn't be his. Sarah tried to make him acknowledge it, and he... Cole stopped, took a breath. He had her run out of town, spread rumors that she was a whore, destroyed her reputation so thoroughly that no one would even look at her. She ended up in a mining camp 200 miles from here, working in a... He couldn't say it. She died giving birth, alone, scared, because Marcus Vale couldn't be bothered to do the decent thing. Clara felt something crack in her chest. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's not your fault. Still, I'm sorry that happened to her. Cole nodded, didn't look at her. She was 22, had her whole life ahead of her, and he threw her away like garbage because acknowledging her would have been inconvenient. What happened to the baby? Stillborn. The word fell heavy in the small space. Clara wrapped the blanket tighter, wishing she could offer comfort, but knowing nothing she said would help. Some wounds didn't heal, they just scarred over and waited. So that's why, Cole said after a while. That's why I'm here. Not for justice. There's no such thing as justice for people like Sarah, but I can make sure he doesn't get to do it again. Can make sure he loses something he wants as badly as he wanted respectability when my sister was begging him for help. You want revenge. I want balance. He took something from me. I'm taking something from him. Clara studied him across the fire. And once we're clear of here, once I'm safe in Denver and he's lost his prize, what then? You going back to kill him? Cole smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Hadn't decided yet. Don't. He looked at her sharply. Don't what? Don't kill him. Don't give him the satisfaction of turning you into a murderer. You want to hurt him? Let him live knowing he lost. That you beat him without firing a shot. That's not enough. It has to be. Because if you kill him, you're not balancing anything. You're just adding more death to the pile. Since when do you care what happens to Marcus? I don't. I care what happens to you. You help me get away from this and then you do something stupid and get yourself hanged? That's not balance either. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. A short, surprise sound. You know, for someone running for her life, you sure are worried about other people. Someone has to be. Fair enough. He stood and walked to the door, looking out at the darkness. We should try to sleep. Few hours at least. I'll take first watch. Watch for what? Whatever comes. Clara wanted to argue, but her body was done. She lay down on the dirt floor, using her bundled wet dress as a pillow, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. The ground was hard and cold, and she could feel every stone digging into her back. She closed her eyes anyway. When she opened them again, pale gray light was filtering through the holes in the roof. The fire had died to ash. Cole was standing by the door, looking out at something she couldn't see. We've got a problem, he said, without turning around. Clara sat up, wincing at how much her body hurt. What kind of problem? Riders, 3 of them, about a mile back. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Are they following us? If they're not, they're doing a damn good impression of it. He turned to face her. Get dressed. We need to move now. Clara scrambled into her still damp clothes, fingers clumsy with fear and cold. Cole was already saddling the horses. By the time she stumbled outside, he had both animals ready. Can you ride hard? He asked. I don't have a choice, do I? Not really, no. He helped her mount. She was too shaky to do it alone, and then swung into his own saddle with easy grace. For a second, he just sat there, looking back the way they'd come. Clara followed his gaze. In the early morning light, she could see them now. 3 horses, moving at a steady pace, still too far to make out faces, but close enough to know they were real. Who are they? She asked. Take a wild guess. Marcus. Of course. He wouldn't waste time with legal niceties when he could just take what he wanted by force. Clara felt sick. How did they find us so fast? Doesn't matter. Come on. He kicked his horse into a gallop. Clara followed, gripping the reins so hard her knuckles went white. Behind them, she heard a shout. Whoever was following had spotted them. The chase was on. They rode east into the rising sun, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. The terrain here was rough, all rocks and scrub brush, perfect for breaking a horse's leg. Cole picked his way through it with practiced ease, finding trails Clara would have missed. After 20 minutes of hard riding, he led them into a narrow canyon. The walls rose steep on either side, cutting out most of the light. It felt like riding into a throat. This is a dead end, Clara shouted over the pounding hooves. Trust me. She didn't have a choice. The canyon twisted and turned, getting narrower with each bend. Just when Clara was sure they were trapped, it opened into a wider space, a box canyon with walls too steep to climb. Cole dismounted. Off! Now! What are we— Now, Clara. She slid down. Her legs nearly gave out, but Cole caught her elbow, steadying her. He led both horses to the far wall and looped their reins over a dead tree branch. There's a cave, Yidit, he said, pointing to a dark opening in the canyon wall. About 10 feet up. Can you climb? Clara looked at the rocks. They were rough, offering plenty of handholds, but steep. I think so. Don't think. Do. And do it quiet. He boosted her up to the first ledge. Clara found a grip and pulled herself higher. Her arms screamed in protest, but she kept going. The cave entrance was smaller than it had looked from below, barely wide enough for a person. She squeezed through and found herself in darkness. Cole came up behind her a moment later, moving with the silence of someone who'd done this before. He pushed past her, deeper into the cave. Stay quiet, he breathed. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Below, Clara heard the riders enter the canyon. Hoofbeats echoed off the stone walls, then voices. They came this way. I can see the tracks. That was Deputy Holm. Clara would recognize his wheezing drawl anywhere. Then where are they? Another voice, younger, probably one of Marcus's hired hands. Must be hiding. This from Marcus himself. Check the cave openings. Clara's breath caught. Cole's hand found her arm in the darkness, squeezed once. A warning or reassurance, she couldn't tell. Too steep, Holmes said. They couldn't have climbed it with horses. Maybe they left the horses. Maybe they're on foot. Then we'll find them easy enough. Ain't nowhere to run in here. Silence. Then the sound of someone dismounting. Footsteps on rock. Clara pressed herself against the cave wall, heart hammering so loud she was sure they'd hear it. Marcus, Holm again. We should head back. Get more men. Come at this proper. I'm not leaving without her. She's long gone, boss. Face it. She's here. Marcus's voice was cold, certain. I can feel it. More footsteps. Closer now. Clara bit down on her knuckle to keep from making a sound. Then, from somewhere deeper in the canyon, a horse whinnied. There! The young hand excited. I heard something. The footsteps moved away. Clara heard them mounting up, riding toward the back of the canyon where the horses were tied. Cole's grip on her arm relaxed slightly. Lucky, he breathed. They'll find the horses, but by the time they figure out we're not there, we'll be gone. How? We can't get past them. Who said anything about going past? He moved deeper into the cave. Come on. I can't see. Follow my voice, and watch your head. Clara shuffled forward, hands outstretched. The cave sloped downward and narrowed even further. She could hear Cole ahead of her, his breathing steady and calm. Where does this go? She whispered. Out the other side of the canyon, old mining tunnel, been here since before the war. How do you know about it? Told you. I used to run cattle through here. You learn the land when your life depends on it. The tunnel seemed to go on forever. Clara lost track of time in the absolute darkness. Her feet hurt. Her hands were scraped from feeling along the rough walls, but she kept moving because Cole was ahead and going back meant Marcus. Finally, she saw light. Faint at first, then growing stronger. The tunnel opened onto a steep hillside on the far side of the canyon. They emerged into daylight that felt blinding after the darkness. Clara stood there blinking, trying to get her bearings. Below, she could see the canyon entrance. No sign of riders. We need to move, Cole said. They'll figure it out eventually. What about the horses? Gone. We're on foot now. Clara wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to curl up right there on the hillside and give up. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and started walking. They moved through rough country for hours. No trails, no landmarks Clara recognized. Just endless rock and scrub and the occasional twisted pine. The sun climbed higher, turning the air hot and thin. Clara's throat was dry. Her feet were blistered inside her boots. But she kept going because Cole kept going, and stopping meant thinking about what they'd left behind. By midday, they reached a creek. Cole called a halt, and they both drank deeply, not caring that the water tasted like mud. How far to Silver Ridge? Clara asked when she could breathe again. 2 days on foot. Maybe less if we push hard. 2 days. Yeah. Clara sat down on a rock. They're not going to stop looking, are they? No. So what's the plan? We can't outrun them without horses. We don't outrun them. We outsmart them. Cole splashed water on his face. There's a stage station about 10 miles south of here. We get there by tonight. We can catch the morning coach to Denver. They'll check the stage station. Probably. Which is why we're not going as us. Clara looked at him. What? You ever been an actress, Clara? No? Well, you're about to be. He stood. Come on, we've got ground to cover and a disguise to figure out. They walked through the afternoon heat. Cole explained his plan as they went. They'd approach the station separately. He'd go in as a prospector looking for transport. She'd be a preacher's widow heading east to live with family. Different stories, different people. If Marcus's men came looking for a man and woman traveling together, they'd find nothing. What if they recognize me? Clara asked. They won't. You're going to look completely different. How? He stopped and pulled a knife from his belt. You're going to cut your hair. Clara's hand went instinctively to her head. Her hair had always been long, past her shoulders. Thomas had loved it. No. It's hair, Clara. It'll grow back. It's not about the hair. Then what's it about? She couldn't articulate it. Couldn't explain that cutting her hair felt like cutting away the last piece of who she'd been. Mrs. Thomas Vale, with the long brown hair and the proper dresses and the life she'd built from nothing. Cole's expression softened. I know, but if they catch us, they won't just take you back. They'll make an example. You understand that? She did. Clara took the knife. How short? Short enough that your own mother wouldn't know you. She gathered her hair in one hand and started cutting. It felt wrong. Every slice of the blade made her flinch, but she kept going until most of it lay in the dirt at her feet. Cole studied her critically. Not bad. Dirty your face a little. Slouch when you walk. Keep your eyes down. You'll pass. Clara looked down at the pile of hair, felt something inside her shift. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was freedom. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. They reached the stage station just as the sun was setting. It was a shabby building that had seen better days, with a corral out back and a water pump that squeaked when Clara worked the handle. Cole went in first. Clara waited 5 minutes, then followed. The station master was an old man with rheumy eyes and a suspicious nature. He looked Clara up and down when she approached his desk. Help you? I need passage on tomorrow's stage, to Denver. That'll be $12. Clara pulled money from her pocket, the tin she'd taken from under the floorboard. She counted out the bills carefully. The station master took the money and made a note in his ledger. Name? Clara hesitated, then, Mary Cooper. Traveling alone, Mrs. Cooper? Yes. Not advisable for a woman. I don't have a choice. He grunted, handed her a ticket. Stage leaves at dawn, don't be late. Clara took the ticket and went to wait outside. Cole was already there, sitting on the porch with his hat pulled low. He didn't acknowledge her. She sat on the opposite end of the porch and watched the road. An hour passed. Then 2. Other passengers arrived, a merchant with too much luggage, a young couple who couldn't stop touching each other, an old woman who complained about everything. No sign of Marcus or his men. Clara started to breathe easier. Then, just as full dark settled, she heard horses. 4 riders this time, coming hard. They pulled up in front of the station in a cloud of dust. Clara recognized Deputy Holm immediately, and beside him, Marcus. Her blood went cold. Marcus dismounted and strode to the door. Anyone seen a woman? Brown hair? Traveling with a man? The station master came out, annoyed at the interruption. Lots of people come through here. You'll have to be more specific. Brunette, pretty, probably scared. Her name's Clara Vale. Don't know any Clara Vale. Marcus's jaw tightened. She's running from the law. Theft. If you're hiding her, you're an accessory. I said I don't know her. The station master crossed his arms. Now, unless you've got actual business here, I'd appreciate you moving along. Got passengers trying to rest. Marcus looked at the people on the porch. His eyes passed over Clara without stopping, moved to Cole, kept going. Clara didn't breathe. Search the area, Marcus told his men. Check the barn, the corral. If she's here, find her. The men spread out. Clara sat perfectly still, eyes on her lap, trying to look like nothing more than a tired woman waiting for a stage. One of the hired hands walked past her, so close she could smell the sweat on him. He looked at her face. "Ma'am." Clara nodded, didn't speak. He moved on. Marcus stood in the yard looking frustrated. "She's here. I know she is." "Well, I don't see her," Holmes said. "Maybe we should—" "We're not leaving." "Boss, it's getting late. Horses need rest." Marcus ignored him. He walked the length of the porch, studying each person. When he got to Clara, he stopped. She could feel his eyes on her. Tried not to shake. "You," he said. "Look at me." Clara raised her head slowly, met his eyes, saw the moment he tried to place her face, and couldn't. "You seen a woman matching the description I gave?" "No, sir." Clara kept her voice soft, slightly hoarse, nothing like her normal tone. "I've been here since afternoon. Just me and the other passengers." Marcus stared at her a moment longer, then nodded and moved on to Cole. "You?" "Nope," Cole said without looking up. "Sorry, I can't help." Marcus made a frustrated sound and turned back to his men. "Mount up, we're checking the next station." They left in the same cloud of dust they'd arrived in. Clara waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely before she let herself breathe. Across the porch, Cole met her eyes, the ghost of a smile on his face. They'd made it. For now. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat on the porch with her back against the station wall, listening to every sound. The creak of wood settling, the shuffle of horses in the corral, the snoring of the merchant who'd claimed the only bench. Every noise made her flinch, certain Marcus had come back. But the hours passed quietly. When the first gray light touched the horizon, the station master came out and rang a bell. "Stage leaves in 30 minutes. Get your belongings sorted." Clara stood, joints stiff from sitting all night. Her body felt like one giant bruise. Cole was already up, checking the straps on his saddlebag. He caught her eye and gave the smallest nod. They were really doing this. The stage rolled up exactly on time. A battered Concord coach pulled by 6 tired-looking horses. The driver was a weathered man who looked like he'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. "All aboard, who's coming aboard?" he called. "Denver route. We stop twice for fresh horses and once for a meal. Anyone causing trouble gets left on the side of the road. That clear?" The passengers mumbled agreement and started climbing in. Clara waited until Cole had boarded before she took her turn. Inside, the coach smelled like old leather and sweat. The seats were crammed, 9 people in a space meant for 6. Clara ended up squeezed between the complaining old woman and a rancher who took up more than his share of room. Cole sat across from her, wedged next to the young couple. He kept his hat pulled low and his eyes on the window. The driver cracked his whip, and they lurched into motion. For the first hour, Clara couldn't relax. She kept watching the road behind them, waiting for riders to appear. But the only thing she saw was empty country rolling past, scrub and rock and the occasional stunted tree. The old woman next to her kept up a running commentary on everything wrong with the coach, the road, the weather, and life in general. Clara made non-committal sounds and tried to tune her out. They stopped at mid-morning to change horses. A sorry excuse for a station that was really just a barn with delusions of grandeur. Everyone climbed out to stretch while the fresh team was hitched. Clara walked to the side of the building and stood in the shade, trying to work feeling back into her legs. Cole came around the corner a moment later, checking to make sure they were alone. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "I've been better. We're making good time. If we keep this pace, we'll be in Denver by tomorrow evening." "And then what?" "Then you disappear. New name, new life. I know people who can help with papers if you need them." Clara looked at him. "What about you? Where do you go?" "Wherever," he shrugged. "I'm good at moving. You've been doing this a long time, haven't you? Running." "I prefer to think of it as strategic relocation." "That's just running with better words." Cole smiled slightly. "Maybe, but it keeps me breathing, so I'll take it." The driver called for everyone to board again. They climbed back in and the coach rolled on. The second stop came early afternoon. This station actually had a dining room, a generous term for a room with 3 tables and a woman serving stew that tasted like sadness. But it was hot, and Clara was hungry enough not to care. She sat alone at the far table, keeping her head down. The other passengers were louder now, complaining about the road and the heat and the quality of the food, normal travel gripes. The sound of it was almost comforting. Cole bought his meal and took it outside to eat on the porch. Smart. Less chance of someone starting a conversation. Clara was halfway through her bowl when she heard horses outside. Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. Please be travelers. Please be anyone else. The door opened. Deputy Holm walked in, followed by two of Marcus's hired men. No Marcus himself, which somehow made it worse. He'd sent his dogs to do the hunting. Clara kept eating, slow bites, eyes on her bowl. Holm walked to the woman serving food. We're looking for someone. Woman, brown hair, traveling with a man. You seen anyone like that? Lots of folks come through. The woman didn't look up from ladling stew. Can't keep track of them all. This one's wanted for theft. There's a reward for information. That got the woman's attention. How much? $20? The merchant at the next table perked up. What'd she look like exactly? Pretty. Brown hair past her shoulders, probably wearing black mourning clothes. Traveling with a dark-haired man, tall, might be armed. Clara felt every muscle in her body lock up. The description was too close. Someone was going to look at her and see past the short hair and the dirt and realize, I saw someone like that, the rancher said. Yesterday. At the station 2 stops back. Woman in black with long hair. Had a man with her too. Clara's heart stuttered. You sure? Holm leaned forward. You sure it was them? Can't be certain, but it fits. They were arguing about something. Looked like they were in a hurry. Which direction did they go? South, I think. Didn't pay much attention after that. Holm exchanged looks with his men. South. That'd put them on the Silver Creek route. Or they could be lying low somewhere between here and there, one of the hired men said. Either way, it's not this route. Holm straightened. Come on. We're wasting time here. They left without ordering food. Clara waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded before she let herself breathe. The rancher caught her eye and winked. She stared at him, confused. He'd just lied to the law, deliberately sent them in the wrong direction. He went back to his meal like nothing had happened. After dinner, when they were all climbing back into the coach, Clara made sure to be the last one out. The rancher was ahead of her. She touched his arm. Thank you, she said quietly. He looked at her with eyes that saw more than they should. Don't know what you're running from, and don't need to know. But I know the look of someone being hunted, and I know Marcus Vale is a bastard who doesn't deserve to win. He tipped his hat. Good luck, ma'am. He climbed into the coach before she could respond. Clara stood there a moment, blinking back unexpected tears. A stranger had just saved her life. Hadn't asked questions, hadn't demanded explanations. Just saw someone who needed help and helped. She made a mental note to remember that, to be that person for someone else someday. The afternoon stretched long and hot. The coach rattled over rough roads, jostling everyone inside until Clara's teeth ached. The old woman fell asleep and started snoring. The young couple whispered to each other in voices that carried more than they realized. The merchant read the same newspaper for the 4th time. Cole caught Clara's eye once, made a small gesture that might have been reassurance or might have been nothing. She looked out the window and watched the landscape change. Less rock now, more grass. They were getting close to the territories where civilization had a firmer hold, where there were actual towns instead of just collections of buildings pretending to be towns, where she could disappear. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it just felt hollow. What was she disappearing into? She had no plan beyond survival. No idea what she'd do in Denver, or how she'd live, or who she'd be. Mary Cooper. That's who the ticket said. But Mary Cooper wasn't real. She was just a name Clara had grabbed out of thin air because she'd needed something that wasn't Clara Vale. Who was Clara Vale now? Not Thomas's widow. That life was gone. Not the woman who'd lived in that house and tended that garden and dreamed of a future that made sense. Just someone running. And at some point, the running had to stop. They made the final horse change just before sunset. The station here was bigger, almost a real town. Clara saw a church steeple in the distance, houses with actual paint, a main street with shops that weren't falling apart. Last stop before Denver, the driver announced. We're staying here tonight. Coach leaves again at dawn. You want lodging? There's a boarding house 3 streets over. Mrs. Holloway runs it. Tell her Jack sent you." The passengers climbed out stiffly. Clara's legs felt like they might not hold her, but she made it to solid ground and stood there swaying slightly. Cole touched her elbow. "You need to eat and sleep in a real bed." "I need a lot of things." "Start with those." The boarding house was exactly what Clara expected: clean enough, cheap enough, anonymous enough. Mrs. Holloway took their money without asking questions and showed them to separate rooms on the second floor. Clara's room had a bed, a chair, and a basin for washing. That was it. But after 2 days of running, it felt like a palace. She stripped off her filthy clothes and washed with cold water from the basin. Her reflection in the small mirror was shocking: short hair standing up at odd angles, face streaked with dirt and sunburn, eyes that looked older than they had a week ago. She didn't look like Clara Vale anymore. Maybe that was the point. There was a knock on her door. Clara grabbed her chemise and pulled it on before answering. Cole stood in the hallway holding 2 plates of food. "Mrs. Holloway had extra from dinner. Thought you might be hungry." Clara's stomach answered for her. She took one of the plates and stepped back to let him in. He set his own plate on the chair and leaned against the wall. "How are you holding up?" "I'm still moving." "That's something." "That's everything." Clara sat on the bed and ate. The food was simple: beans and cornbread, but it tasted better than anything she'd had in days. Real food, cooked by someone who cared about flavor instead of just fuel. "That rancher," she said between bites, "the one who lied to the deputy. You know him?" "Never seen him before." "Why do you think he did it?" Cole shrugged. "Some people just don't like bullies, and Marcus has a reputation. Wouldn't surprise me if he's made enemies all over the territory." "Enough enemies that strangers will help someone running from him?" "Maybe. Or maybe the rancher just recognized the look of someone who needed help." Cole picked up his own plate. "Not everyone's rotten, Clara. Just feels that way sometimes." They ate in silence for a while. Through the thin walls, Clara could hear the other boarders settling in for the night. Normal sounds, normal lives. "What was she like?" Clara asked. "Your sister." Cole stopped eating. "Why do you want to know?" "Because she's the reason we're here, and because I should know something about her if I'm part of this." He was quiet long enough that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She was stubborn, smart, had this laugh that made everyone around her want to laugh too, even if they didn't know what was funny." He stared at his plate. "She wanted to open a dress shop someday. Had all these plans. Drew sketches of what she'd sell, how she'd arrange things. She was going to call it Sarah's Styles." A bitter smile crossed his face. "Stupid name. I told her that. She hit me with her sketchbook and said it was better than anything I could come up with." "She sounds wonderful." "She was." Cole set his plate aside. "She deserved better than what she got." "Most people do." "Yeah, but most people don't get their lives destroyed by someone like Marcus just because they had the bad luck to be pretty and poor." Clara thought about that, about how many women's lives got destroyed for exactly those reasons, about how the law protected men like Marcus and abandoned women like Sarah. "When this is over," she said slowly, "when I'm settled somewhere and safe, I want to do something. Help other women who are running from men like Marcus, women who need a way out and don't have one." Cole looked at her. "That's dangerous work. Living is dangerous. Might as well make it count for something." "You really mean that?" "I do." And Clara realized she did. Somewhere between the fear and the running and the exhaustion, something had crystallized in her, a purpose, a reason beyond just survival. "I can't bring Sarah back, can't undo what happened to her, but maybe I can keep it from happening to someone else." "You sound like her," Cole said quietly. "She used to talk like that, about making things better, helping people." He stood and picked up his plate. "Get some rest. We've got another long day tomorrow." He left before Clara could respond. She finished her food and lay down on the bed without bothering to pull back the covers. Her body was past exhausted, but her mind wouldn't settle. She kept replaying the last few days, the will, the escape, the chase, the disguises. All of it felt unreal, like something that had happened to someone else. But the ache in her muscles was real. The fear sitting heavy in her chest was real. The future stretching out uncertain and terrifying was real. Clara closed her eyes and tried to sleep. She woke to gunfire. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then she heard shouting outside and footsteps pounding on the stairs, and everything snapped into focus. Clara rolled out of bed and grabbed her dress, pulling it on over her chemise. Her fingers shook as she worked the buttons. Another shot, closer this time. She went to the window and looked out. Dawn was just breaking, painting everything in shades of gray. In the street below, she saw horses, 4 of them, and Marcus Vale standing in the middle of the road with a gun in his hand. Her heart stopped. Someone pounded on her door. "Clara, we need to go now." Cole. She ran to the door and yanked it open. He was already dressed, hat in hand, looking grim. "How did he find us?" she asked. "Doesn't matter. Backstairs. Move." They ran down the hall. Behind them, Clara heard boots on the front stairs. Heavy. Multiple people. The back stairs were narrow and dark. Clara took them 2 at a time, Cole right behind her. They burst out into an alley that smelled like garbage and horse piss. "This way," Cole said, pulling her left. They ran. Behind them, more shouting. The sound of doors being kicked in. The alley opened onto a side street. Cole didn't slow down, just kept running. Clara's lungs burned, but she pushed harder, dress hiked up to keep from tripping. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with a woman carrying laundry. "Sorry," Clara gasped, but didn't stop. Another alley. This one narrower, barely wide enough for one person. Clara's shoulders brushed both walls. Then it opened into a yard behind what looked like a stable. Cole headed straight for it. Inside, horses stamped and snorted in their stalls. A stable hand looked up, startled. "We need horses," Cole said. "Now. I'll pay double." "I can't just—" Cole pulled out bills. "Triple." The stable hand's eyes went wide. He grabbed the money and pointed to 2 horses in the back stalls. "Take those, and get out before I change my mind." They saddled up fast, hands moving on instinct. Clara's fingers remembered how, even though her brain was screaming, they led the horses out through the back and mounted in the yard. "Which way?" Clara asked. "North. There's a river about 5 miles from here. We cross it, we'll lose them." They rode hard through the waking town. People were starting to emerge, shopkeepers opening their stores, women sweeping porches, a kid chasing a dog. Normal morning activities that felt surreal against the background of pursuit. Clara heard horses behind them, looked back and saw Marcus and his men rounding the corner. "They're coming!" "I know, stay low and ride fast." The edge of town came up quick. Then they were in open country, grass and scattered trees. The horses were fresh and fast, eating up ground. But Marcus's horses were fresh too, and his men knew how to ride. The gap wasn't closing, but it wasn't widening either. Clara's world narrowed to the rhythm of hoofbeats, and the burn in her thighs, and the wind tearing at her short hair. She could hear Cole next to her, urging his horse on. Behind them, the pursuing riders. The river appeared ahead, a wide band of brown water cutting through the grassland. Even from a distance, Clara could see it was running fast. Storm runoff from the mountains, probably. The water churned and frothed around rocks. "That's too rough to cross," she shouted. "We don't have a choice." Cole hit the river at full gallop. His horse plunged in, water spraying up around them. The current caught them immediately, pushing sideways. Clara didn't let herself think. She kicked her horse forward and felt the ground disappear beneath them. The water was shockingly cold. It soaked through her dress in seconds, weighing her down. The horse struggled beneath her, fighting the current. Clara gripped the saddle with both hands and tried to stay on. Halfway across, the horse stumbled. Clara felt herself sliding sideways. She grabbed for the mane, but her hands were wet and numb and couldn't hold on. She hit the water hard. The current took her immediately. Clara went under, swallowing river water, hands grasping at nothing. She broke the surface, gasping, got one breath before the current pulled her under again. Something grabbed her arm. She fought it instinctively until she realized it was Cole. He dismounted and was in the water next to her, one hand locked around her wrist. "Stop fighting!" he yelled over the roar of the water. Clara made herself go limp. Cole pulled her toward the far bank, using the current instead of fighting it. Her boots dragged on the bottom. Then solid ground. Cole hauled her up onto the bank, and they both collapsed in the mud. For a long moment, Clara just lay there breathing. Everything hurt. Her lungs felt scraped raw. Water dripped from her hair into her eyes. She forced herself to look up. Across the river, Marcus and his men had pulled up on the opposite bank. They sat their horses, staring across the water. Marcus's face was dark with fury. "You can't run forever," he shouted. "I'll find you, Clara. You're mine." Cole pushed himself up to his knees, looked at Marcus across the churning water, and slowly, deliberately, raised his hand in a gesture that was unmistakably obscene. Marcus's face went purple. Clara started laughing. She couldn't help it. The whole situation was insane. Soaking wet, half drowned, being shouted at by a man claiming to own her while another man flipped him off across a raging river. It was absurd. The laughter turned into coughing. Cole helped her sit up, pounding her back until she could breathe again. "You all right?" he asked. "I almost drowned." "But did you die?" "Not yet." "Then you're all right." He stood and offered his hand. "Come on, we need to keep moving." Clara let him pull her up. Across the river, Marcus was conferring with his men, probably planning where to cross, how long they had. The horses had both made it across and were grazing nearby, apparently unconcerned about the drama. Cole caught them and checked to make sure the saddlebags were still intact. "How far to Denver?" Clara asked. "At this pace? We could make it by nightfall if we push." "Then let's push." They mounted up again. Clara's dress clung to her, heavy with water. She'd lost a boot somewhere in the river. Her feet were numb with cold. But she was alive and moving. Across the river, Marcus was still watching them. Clara met his eyes one last time. Then she turned her horse and rode away without looking back. They rode through the day, stopping only to let the horses rest. The country grew more settled as they went. Actual farms instead of just rangeland, roads instead of trails, signs of civilization creeping back in. Late afternoon, they saw it. Denver rising out of the plains like a promise. Buildings, streets, people, safety in numbers. "Almost there," Cole said. Clara nodded. She was too tired to speak, too tired to feel relief or fear or anything except the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been running for days. They reached the outskirts as the sun touched the horizon. Denver was bigger than Clara had imagined. Blocks and blocks of buildings, streets crowded with wagons and horses and people going about their business. She could disappear here, become someone new, start over. The thought should have been hopeful. Instead, it just felt lonely. Cole led them to a boarding house on a quiet street. The landlady who answered the door took one look at their condition and didn't ask questions. "Baths down the hall," she said. "Rooms are $2 a week, meals included. You staying long?" "Haven't decided yet," Cole said. They climbed to the second floor. Cole stopped outside a door and handed Clara a key. "Get cleaned up, get some rest. We'll figure out the next part tomorrow." Clara took the key. "Cole?" "Tomorrow, Clara. You're dead on your feet." He was right. She went into the room and closed the door behind her. It was small but clean, with a real bed and curtains on the window. Clara sat down on the mattress and just stayed there, too exhausted to move. Outside, the city hummed with life. Voices, horses, the rattle of wagon wheels on cobblestones. Normal sounds of normal people living normal lives. Clara looked down at her hands. They were scratched and bruised, nails broken, still stained with mud from the river. Working hands now, survivor's hands. She curled them into fists. Tomorrow she'd figure out what came next, who she'd be, how she'd live. But tonight, she was just going to sit here in this room in this city and let herself feel everything she'd been running from. The fear, the grief, the anger, the desperate aching hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd made it far enough to be safe. Outside, night fell over Denver, and Clara Vale sat alone in a rented room, still breathing, still alive, still fighting. And for now, that was enough. Clara woke to someone pounding on her door. She jerked upright, heart racing, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. For a confused second, she didn't know where she was. Then the room came into focus. Denver. The boarding house. Safe. The pounding came again. "Clara, it's me. Open up." Cole's voice. Clara stumbled to the door and unlocked it. He stood in the hallway, fully dressed, holding a newspaper. His face was pale. "What's wrong?" He pushed past her into the room and shut the door, held out the paper without a word. Clara took it. The headline screamed up at her in bold type. Marcus Vale, dead in shooting incident. Below it, smaller text. Prominent rancher killed in altercation outside Silver Ridge. Deputy Holmes sought for questioning. She read it twice to make sure she understood. Then she looked at Cole. He's dead? Happened yesterday, right after we left. Clara sat down hard on the bed. The newspaper crinkled in her shaking hands. How? Keep reading. She scanned the article. Marcus had been shot outside a saloon in Silver Ridge. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Deputy Holm arguing with him over payment for services rendered. The argument escalated. Guns were drawn. Marcus took 2 bullets to the chest and died before the doctor arrived. Holm fled the scene and hadn't been found. I don't understand, Clara said. Why would Holm kill him? My guess? Marcus didn't pay him enough, or promised money he didn't have. Men like Holm don't work for free, and if Marcus was spending everything chasing us… Cole shrugged. Loyalty only goes so far when the money runs out. Claire's mind was spinning. Marcus was dead. The man who'd trapped her, hunted her, claimed to own her, dead. Shot by his own hired gun in a dispute over money. It felt unreal. What does this mean? She asked. It means you're not being chased anymore. It means the will, assuming it was even valid, doesn't matter because there's no one left to enforce it. The land, the house, everything Thomas owned, reverts to you. Marcus had no other family that I know of, and even if he did, they'd have to contest the original will, your will, the one you and Thomas made together. Clara looked at the newspaper again, at Marcus's name in print. Dead. Gone. The threat that had driven her from her home and across the territory was just over. She started laughing. It came out harsh and jagged, edging toward hysteria. Cole moved toward her, but she waved him off. I'm fine. She couldn't finish. The laughter turned into something else. Not quite crying, just a release of everything she'd been holding back for days. Cole sat down next to her and waited. When she could breathe again, Clara wiped her eyes. What about the forged will? Garrett still has it on file. The medical papers from Morrison. All of it. All of it created by Marcus and signed by witnesses who are now either dead or wanted for murder. You get a decent lawyer, they'll tear those documents apart in about 5 minutes, especially now that Marcus isn't around to pay people to lie about them. A lawyer. Clara's remaining money wouldn't cover a lawyer, barely covered 2 weeks of room and board. I know someone, Cole said. A woman named Catherine Brennan. She's one of the few lawyers in Denver who'll take cases for women. Doesn't charge much if you can't afford it. Why would she help me? Because she hates men like Marcus about as much as I do, and because she's good at what she does. He stood. Get dressed. We'll go see her this morning. Clara looked down at herself, still wearing yesterday's mud-stained dress. Her one other dress wasn't much better. I don't exactly look like someone who can afford a lawyer. You look like someone who's been running for her life. Brennan will understand that. Catherine Brennan's office was above a bakery on a street that smelled like fresh bread and horses. The sign on the door read, K. Brennan, Attorney at Law, Consultations by Appointment. Cole knocked anyway. Come in if you're not selling something, a woman's voice called. They entered a cramped office stuffed with law books and filing cabinets. Papers covered every surface. A woman in her 40s sat behind a desk that was somehow even more cluttered than the rest of the room. She had steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen through 1,000 lies. She glanced up, saw Cole. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. Maddox? Thought you were dead. Disappointed? Relieved, actually. You owed me $20. She turned her attention to Clara. And who's this? Clara Vale. She needs help. Brennan gestured to the chairs across from her desk. They sat. Clara felt those sharp eyes taking her apart. The short hair, the worn dress, the exhaustion written in every line of her face. Let me guess, Brennan said. Husband's dead, brother-in-law tried to claim the estate, you ran rather than fight it in court. Clara blinked. How did you… It's always the same story. Details change, but the structure's identical. I've handled 6 cases like this in the last year alone. Brennan leaned back in her chair. Tell me what happened. All of it. Don't leave anything out, even if you think it makes you look bad. So Clara told her. About Thomas's death, the will, Marcus's ultimatum, the escape, the chase, the river. She left out Cole's personal vendetta. That was his story to tell. But she laid out everything else. Brennan listened without interrupting. When Clara finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You have the forged will? She finally asked. No, Garrett kept it. But you saw it. Can you describe it? The language, the signatures, any details you remember? Clara closed her eyes and pulled up the image. It was dated 6 weeks before Thomas died. Tuesday the 14th. The handwriting looked like Thomas's, but the phrasing was wrong. He never used words like aforementioned or hereby decree. He was a rancher, not a lawyer. Good. That's good. What else? It was witnessed by Marcus and Deputy Holm, and there was a medical report from Dr. Morrison claiming Thomas was suffering from mental decline. Brennan made notes on a piece of paper. Morrison's a drunk who'll sign anything for $5. His testimony won't hold up, and with Marcus dead and Holm wanted for murder, the witnesses are compromised. She looked up. This is actually better than I expected. We can fight this. How? We file a challenge to the fraudulent will and petition to have the original will reinstated as valid. We'll need depositions from anyone who can testify to Thomas's mental state in the weeks before his death. Friends, neighbors, business associates, anyone who can contradict Morrison's claims. Most of them won't talk, Claire said. Marcus owned half the town. Marcus is dead. People talk differently when there's no one left to threaten them. Brennan pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I'll need you to write down everything you remember about the original will. What it said, who witnessed it, where it's filed. Then make a list of everyone who knew Thomas and might be willing to testify. How long will this take? Months? Maybe longer. These things don't happen quickly. I can't pay you months' worth of fees. Brennan waved a hand. I'll take a percentage of the settlement when we win. If we win. If we lose, you owe me nothing. That doesn't seem fair to you. Fair? Brennan's smile was sharp. Honey, nothing about this situation is fair, but I didn't become a lawyer to get rich. I became one because I got tired of watching women get robbed by men who knew the law would back them up. She stood. Give me 2 days to file the initial paperwork. In the meantime, stay in Denver. Don't go back home. Don't contact anyone from your old life. Let me handle this. Clara stood too. Thank you. Thank me when we win. Outside, the morning had turned warm. Clara stood on the sidewalk, still trying to process everything. Marcus dead. A lawyer fighting for her. The possibility of getting her home back. You all right? Cole asked. I don't know. I think so. She looked at him. You knew she'd help. Brennan's good people. Doesn't take many cases, but when she does, she fights like hell. How do you know her? She helped my sister. Before... He stopped. Started again. Sarah went to her when she found out about the baby. Asked if there was any legal way to make Marcus acknowledge paternity. Brennan tried. Did everything she could. But there wasn't enough evidence, and Marcus had better lawyers, better connections. His jaw tightened. Sarah wrote me about Brennan in her letters. Said she was the only person who treated her like a human being instead of a problem to be solved. Clara understood. I'm sorry it didn't work out for her. Me too. Cole started walking. Come on, I'll buy you breakfast. You need actual food. They found a diner 2 streets over. It was crowded with morning customers, working men eating before their shifts, shop girls grabbing coffee, a few businessmen reading newspapers. Normal people living normal lives. Clara and Cole took a corner booth. A tired-looking waitress brought coffee without being asked. 2 breakfast plates, Cole told her. Eggs, bacon, whatever you've got. Coming right up, hun? Clara wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. Across the table, Cole was reading the newspaper article about Marcus again. You think Holm will be caught? She asked. Eventually. He's not smart enough to disappear for long. He'll get drunk in some town, start bragging about what he did, and someone will turn him in for the reward. There's a reward? Always is. Territorial Marshal doesn't like having wanted men running around loose. Makes him look bad. The waitress brought their food. Clara attacked it with an appetite she hadn't felt in days. Real eggs, real bacon, bread that was fresh instead of stale. She ate until her stomach actually felt full. Cole was watching her with something that might have been amusement. What? She said around a mouthful of eggs. Nothing. Just nice to see you eat something that's not stew or hardtack. I was hungry. I noticed. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence. When the check came, Cole paid before Clara could object. "Consider it payment for not getting you killed," he said. "You didn't get me killed. You kept me alive." "Barely." "Still counts." They walked back toward the boarding house through streets that were getting busier as the day progressed. Clara watched the people around her, women shopping, men heading to work, children playing in alleys. Denver felt different from the towns she knew. Bigger, louder, more anonymous. She could build a life here, find work, make friends, become someone new. But first, she had to deal with who she'd been. Back at the boarding house, Clara spent the afternoon doing what Brennan had asked, writing down everything she could remember about the original will, making lists of potential witnesses. Her hand cramped from writing, but she pushed through. Thomas had been well liked. People had respected him even if they hadn't been close friends. The problem was that most of those people were still back in Marcus's territory, and traveling back to give depositions would mean facing everyone she'd run from. Clara added names anyway. Let Brennan figure out how to make it work. She was finishing up when someone knocked on her door. Cole again, looking grim. "We've got a problem," he said. Clara's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Come downstairs. You need to see this." She followed him down to the boarding house parlor. A man was waiting there, young, well-dressed, carrying a leather satchel. He stood when Clara entered. "Mrs. Vale? I'm Daniel Foster. I work for a legal firm in Silver Ridge." He pulled papers from his satchel. "I've been instructed to deliver these to you personally." Clara took the papers. Legal documents, dense with text. She scanned the first page and felt her blood go cold. "What is this?" "A claim against your late husband's estate, filed by Mr. Marcus Vale's cousin, Robert Vale. He's contesting the original will and asserting his right to inherit as the last surviving male relative." Cole swore under his breath. Clara looked at Foster. "Marcus had a cousin?" "Apparently. From what I understand, they weren't close, but Mr. Robert Vale is arguing that since Marcus was designated heir in the most recent will, and that will has not been legally invalidated, his rights as Marcus's heir supersede any claim you might have." "That's insane. The will is fraudulent." "That will need to be proven in court, ma'am. Until then, it remains a valid legal document." Foster's tone was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry. I'm just delivering the papers. You have 30 days to respond with your own legal representation." He left before Clara could find words. She stood there holding the documents, hands shaking. Just when she thought it was over, someone new crawled out of the woodwork to claim what wasn't theirs. "Did you know Marcus had a cousin?" she asked Cole. "No, but I didn't know everything about his family." He took the papers from her and read through them. His expression darkened. "This is a scam. Has to be. Robert Vale shows up right after Marcus dies, conveniently claims inheritance rights. He's probably some con artist who read about Marcus's death and saw an opportunity. How do we prove that?" "We don't have to. Brennan will." Cole folded the papers and handed them back. "Take these to her tomorrow. She'll know what to do." Clara wanted to throw something, wanted to scream. She'd run across the territory, nearly drowned, lost everything she owned, and it still wasn't enough. There was always someone else trying to take from her. "I'm so tired," she said quietly. "I'm just so tired of fighting." Cole's expression softened. "I know, but you're almost through it. One more push and you'll have your life back." "What if I don't want it back? What if I don't want to go back to that house and that town and all those memories?" "Then you don't. You sell everything and start fresh somewhere else. But that's a choice you get to make, not something forced on you by men who think they own you." Clara looked at the papers in her hand. 30 days to respond. 30 days to find witnesses and build a case and prove that she had a right to her own life. She could do it, had to do it, because the alternative was giving up, and she'd run too far to give up now. The next morning, Clara went back to Brennan's office with Cole. The lawyer read through Robert Vale's claim without visible reaction. "Interesting," she said finally. "That's one word for it," Cole muttered. "No, I mean it's actually interesting from a legal standpoint. Robert Vale is claiming inheritance through Marcus, who inherited through a potentially fraudulent will. If we can prove the will is fake, then Marcus never had legal right to the property, which means Robert can't inherit what Marcus never legally owned." She tapped the papers. "This might actually make our case easier." "How?" Clara asked. Because now we're not just fighting to restore your rights. We're fighting to prevent a complete stranger from stealing property based on a chain of fraudulent documents. Judges don't like that. Makes them look bad when it gets appealed. So what do? We accelerate the timeline. I'll file an emergency petition to freeze the estate pending investigation of the will's authenticity. That'll prevent Robert from taking possession while we build our case. Then we go after the witnesses and documents hard and fast. I thought you said this would take months. It will. But we can make those months very uncomfortable for Mr. Robert Vale. Brennan's smile was predatory. I'm going to need you to go back home, Clara, just for a few days. We need depositions from people who knew Thomas, and we need to get our hands on the original will if it still exists. Clara felt her throat tighten. I can't go back there. You have to. I can send someone to gather depositions, but the original will has to be retrieved by you or your legal proxy. And frankly, having you there in person will carry more weight. Show people you're not running scared anymore. But I am scared. Then be scared and do it anyway. Brennan leaned forward. Look, I understand this is hard, but these people, Garrett, Morrison, whoever else helped Marcus, they're counting on you being too afraid to come back. That's how men like them win. They make you so scared that you abandon your own rights. Don't give them that satisfaction. Clara looked at Cole. He was watching her with that steady gaze, not pushing, but not backing down either. I'll go with you, he said. Make sure nothing happens. Cole, you don't have to. I know. I'm doing it anyway. Brennan nodded approvingly. Good. I'll draw up the necessary paperwork tonight. You can leave tomorrow, get what you need, and be back within a week. I'll handle Robert Vale from here. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to find any excuse not to go back. But Brennan was right. Running away had saved her life. But it wouldn't give her life back. For that, she had to face what she'd run from. They left Denver 2 days later on the morning stage. Clara wore a new dress, still black, but clean and properly fitted. Brennan had advanced her money against the eventual settlement. It felt strange having money in her pocket again, having options. Cole sat across from her in the coach, hat pulled low, reading the same newspaper for the third time. They were the only passengers heading west. Everyone else was moving toward Denver, toward civilization and opportunity. Clara watched the landscape roll past. Everything looked different going back. Smaller somehow, less threatening. Or maybe she'd changed. They stopped at the same stations they'd used fleeing east. The rancher who'd lied to Deputy Holm was at one of them. He recognized Clara, despite the new dress, and nodded at her. Heard about Marcus, he said quietly, while they were both getting water from the pump. Can't say I'm sorry. Neither can I, Clara admitted. You headed back to claim what's yours? Trying to. He studied her face. You're different than when you came through here before. Stronger. I don't feel stronger. Nobody ever does. That's how you know it's real. He tipped his hat and walked back to his wagon. Clara thought about that as the stage rolled on. Maybe strength wasn't something you felt. Maybe it was just something you did despite feeling weak and scared and completely out of your depth. They reached the territory 2 days later. Clara knew they were getting close when the landscape started looking familiar. Certain rock formations, the shape of hills, the way the light hit the grass at sunset. Home. Or what used to be home. She wasn't sure what to call it anymore. The stage stopped in town just after dark. Clara climbed out on legs that felt unsteady. The main street looked exactly the same. The general store, the saloon, the church, like she'd never left. But she had left. And now she was back. Cole touched her elbow. Where to? The house, I guess. If someone hasn't already claimed it. They walked through town leading their travel bags. A few people stared, but no one approached. Clara couldn't tell if they recognized her or were just curious about strangers. The house sat dark at the edge of town. Clara's steps slowed as they approached. She could see it silhouetted against the twilight sky. The home Thomas built, that she'd fled from, that she'd crossed the territory to escape. It looked smaller than she remembered. She walked up to the porch and tried the door. Locked. But the key was still in its hiding spot under the flower pot. Her hand shook as she unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside, everything was exactly where she'd left it. The lamp on the table, the dishes in the sink, her sewing basket by the chair. Dust covered everything, The air smelled stale, but it was hers. Clara stood in the middle of her kitchen and felt something break open in her chest. Not grief exactly, not relief. Something more complicated. The feeling of coming back to a place that wasn't home anymore, but had been once. Cole stood in the doorway, giving her space. "You all right?" he asked after a while. Clara looked around the room at the life she'd built and lost and was fighting to reclaim. "I will be," she said, and maybe, just maybe, she believed it. Clara spent that first night cleaning. She couldn't sleep in the dusty bed, couldn't stand the feeling of abandonment that clung to everything, so she scrubbed, swept, washed dishes that had been sitting dirty for weeks. Cole helped without being asked, carrying water from the well, fixing the hinge on the cupboard that had always stuck. By dawn, the house looked lived in again. Not home, not yet, but closer. Clara stood at the kitchen window watching the sun come up over land that was legally still hers. Technically. Until Robert Vale or some other vulture tried to take it. "You should eat something," Cole said behind her. She turned. He'd found coffee somewhere and brewed a pot. The smell alone made her feel more human. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've got work to do today." He was right. Brennan had given them a list of people to contact for depositions. Clara needed to visit each one, explain the situation, ask them to testify that Thomas had been sound of mind before his death. Some would help, others wouldn't. She drank her coffee and tried not to think about the ones who wouldn't. Their first stop was the Mercantile. Thomas had done business there for years, always paid on time, always treated the owner fairly. If anyone would testify, it would be Mr. Henderson. The bell over the door chimed when they entered. Henderson looked up from his ledger, saw Clara, and his expression went carefully neutral. "Mrs. Vale, heard you were back in town. News travels fast. Always does." He set down his pen. "What can I do for you?" Clara had rehearsed this, kept her voice steady. "I need your help. I'm challenging the will that gave everything to Marcus. I need people who knew Thomas to testify that he was mentally sound in the weeks before he died, that he wouldn't have written what Marcus claimed he wrote." Henderson was quiet for a long moment. "That's asking a lot." "I know. Marcus had friends, people who benefited from his business. They won't like you stirring this up. Marcus is dead. His cousin isn't, and from what I hear, Robert Vale is cut from the same cloth." Henderson leaned against the counter. "You're asking me to make enemies, Mrs. Vale." Clara felt her hope deflating. "So you won't help." "I didn't say that." Henderson pulled out a piece of paper, started writing. "Thomas was one of the most level-headed men I knew, sharp as a tack right up until the day he died. Never forgot an order, never miscounted change, never once seemed confused about anything." He finished writing and signed it with a flourish. "That's my statement. Your lawyer can use it however she needs." Relief hit Clara so hard she had to grip the counter. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just win. I'm tired of watching good people get robbed by men who think the law only applies to everyone else." He handed her the paper. "And Mrs. Vale? I'm glad you came back. Took guts." They visited 6 more people that day. 4 gave statements. 2 refused. One, old Mrs. Fletcher, who ran the boarding house, actually spat at Clara's feet. "Running off like a common thief," she hissed. "Leaving your husband barely cold in the ground. You should be ashamed." Clara had walked away without responding. What was the point? Mrs. Fletcher had made up her mind years ago that women like Clara were the problem, not men like Marcus. By evening, they had 8 signed statements, all testifying to Thomas's mental clarity, his careful nature, his unlikely candidacy for writing a will that contradicted everything he'd ever said about wanting Clara protected. It was something. Maybe enough. The next day, Clara went to see Garrett. Cole wanted to come with her, but she refused. This was something she needed to do alone. The lawyer's office looked exactly the same. Clara climbed the familiar stairs and pushed through the door without knocking. Garrett looked up, startled. Then his expression hardened. "Mrs. Vale, I heard you were back." "I need to see the will. The original one. The one Thomas and I made together." "I don't have to show you anything." "Actually, you do. I have a court order." Clara pulled the paper Brennan had given her from her bag. "My lawyer filed it yesterday. You're required to produce all documents related to Thomas Vale's estate for inspection. Garrett took the order, read it, his jaw tightened. This is harassment. This is the law, the same law you used to try to rob me. Clara kept her voice level. The will, Mr. Garrett. Now. He stood and went to his filing cabinet, pulled out a folder, dropped it on his desk harder than necessary. There. Happy? Clara opened the folder. Inside were both wills, the original she and Thomas had made, and the forgery Marcus had created. She pulled out the original and read through it carefully. It was exactly as she remembered. Everything split evenly between them. If one died, the other inherited. Simple, clear. Unmistakably Thomas's voice in every line. She looked at the forgery next. Saw immediately what she'd missed before in her panic. The handwriting was close, but not quite right. Thomas had always made his capital letters with a distinctive flourish. These were flatter, more careful, like someone copying instead of writing naturally. This is a fake, she said, holding up the forgery. That's for a court to decide. The court will decide. And when they do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows you helped Marcus forge it, that you participated in fraud and attempted theft. Garrett's face went red. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. Marcus is dead. Holmes wanted for murder. Morrison's a drunk whose medical license barely exists. The witnesses to this will are either dead, fugitives, or completely discredited. What do you think a judge will conclude when I present 8 statements from respected townspeople saying Thomas was perfectly sound, and your only evidence is a document signed by criminals and frauds? Get out of my office. Gladly. Clara took both wills. I'm confiscating these as evidence. If you have a problem with that, take it up with Catherine Brennan in Denver. I'm sure she'd love to hear your objections. She walked out before he could respond. Outside, her hands were shaking. She'd just confronted the man who'd helped trap her, taken what she needed, and walked away. A month ago, she would have been too scared to even try. Cole was waiting across the street. He took one look at her face and smiled. You got him. I got him. How'd Garrett take it? About as well as you'd expect. Clara looked down at the wills in her hands. Cole, this is real. We might actually win this. We will win this. You already did the hard part. You came back. They went to the land office next. The clerk there was a nervous young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else when Clara walked in. I need to see the property deed for the Vale Ranch, she said. I'm not sure I can... Court order. She handed it over. He read it, swallowed hard, and went to pull the file. The deed was in Thomas's name only. Clara had never thought to question that. Most property was held by husbands. But it meant that legally, everything had belonged to Thomas. And when he died without a clear heir designation, it should have gone to his wife. Should have. Would have. If Marcus hadn't interfered. I need a copy of this, Clara said. The clerk made the copy with shaking hands. When he gave it to her, he leaned close. I'm glad you're fighting this, he whispered. Marcus came in here 3 weeks before Thomas died, asking questions about how property transfer worked. What would happen if Thomas died without updating his will? He was planning it even then. Clara felt cold. Did you tell anyone? Who would I tell? Marcus owned half this town, and I... He looked ashamed. I was scared. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be willing to testify. I will. I'll tell the court everything I heard. That made 9 statements. 9 people willing to say that something had been wrong, that Marcus had planned this, that Thomas hadn't been failing mentally. He'd been murdered and then robbed. Clara felt the case building with each piece of evidence, felt the trap that had closed around her starting to spring open. They spent 3 more days gathering statements. The blacksmith, the minister, even Dr. Morrison, who was so drunk he barely understood the questions but signed a retraction of his earlier medical report in exchange for $5 and the promise that Clara wouldn't press charges for fraud. By the end of the week, they had everything Brennan needed. Cole wanted to leave immediately, get back to Denver before anyone decided to cause trouble. But Clara had one more thing to do. She went to Thomas's grave. It was in the town cemetery on a hill overlooking the valley. A simple wooden marker with his name and dates carved deep. Someone had left flowers. Clara didn't recognize the type. She stood there for a long time, trying to find words. But what did you say to a dead husband whose brother had tried to steal his widow? How did you explain that you'd run away instead of staying to fight? That you'd survived when he hadn't? I'm sorry, she finally said. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to fight them at first. I'm sorry I left you here alone, but I'm back now. And I'm going to make sure they don't win. I'm going to make sure what you built doesn't get stolen by people who didn't earn it. The wind rustled through the grass. Clara imagined it was Thomas answering, telling her it was all right, that he understood. She didn't know if the dead could forgive, but she hoped they could. I loved you, she said. I want you to know that. Even if everything went wrong at the end, I loved you. She left before the tears could start. Cole was waiting by the wagon, giving her privacy. He didn't ask what she'd said, just helped her up and drove them back to the house. That night, Clara packed everything she wanted to keep. Her mother's locket, Thomas's favorite shirt, the quilt they'd made together their first winter. Not much, but enough. You're not planning to come back, are you? Cole asked, watching her fold clothes into a trunk. I don't know. Maybe once this is settled, but not to live. There's too much. She gestured vaguely. Too much of everything here. I need somewhere new, somewhere that isn't full of ghosts. Denver's good for that. Big enough to get lost in. Small enough to still feel human. Clara looked at him. What about you? Once this is over and I'm settled, what will you do? Haven't decided yet. You could stay in Denver. There's work there. You could build something instead of just running from things. Maybe. Cole sat on the edge of the bed. Or maybe I'm too used to running. Some habits are hard to break. Some are worth breaking. He smiled slightly. Is this you trying to reform me? This is me saying you helped save my life. I'd like to return the favor if you'd let me. Cole was quiet for a moment, then, Sarah used to say stuff like that I was better than I thought I was, that I just needed to stop punishing myself for things that weren't my fault. She sounds smart. She was. Smarter than me, anyway. He stood. We should get some sleep. Long ride back to Denver tomorrow. But neither of them slept much. Clara lay awake listening to the house settle, wondering if she'd ever see it again, wondering if she even wanted to. They left at dawn. Clara locked the door behind her and put the key back under the flower pot. If she won the case, she'd decide what to do with the property. Sell it, probably. Let someone else build their dreams here. Hers were somewhere else now. The ride to Denver felt shorter than the ride out. Maybe because Clara wasn't running anymore. She was moving towards something instead of away from it. Brennan was waiting in her office when they arrived, surrounded by even more papers than before. You got everything? She asked. Clara handed over the folder. 9 statements, both wills, the property deed, everything you asked for. Brennan flipped through it all with the speed of someone who read legal documents for breakfast. When she finished, she actually smiled. This is good. This is really good. Robert Vale's claim is based entirely on inheriting from Marcus, who inherited through a fraudulent will. With this evidence, I can get the forgery thrown out, which invalidates Marcus's claim, which means Robert inherits nothing. She looked up at Clara. We can win this. When's the hearing? 2 weeks. Judge Morrison, no relation to the drunk doctor, is presiding. He's fair, doesn't like fraud. If we present this properly, he'll rule in your favor. 2 weeks. Clara had been running for almost a month now. 2 more weeks felt like nothing. What do I need to do? She asked. Testify. Tell the truth about what happened. Don't exaggerate, don't embellish. Just tell the judge what Marcus tried to do and how you escaped. The facts are dramatic enough on their own. And Robert Vale? Will he be there? He'd better be. I've got a few questions for him about how he magically appeared right after Marcus died claiming inheritance rights. Brennan's expression was predatory. I did some digging. Robert Vale is a con artist, has 3 different names, 6 different claims to property in 4 territories, none of which have held up in court. He finds dead men with contested estates and claims to be long-lost relatives. Usually works because the actual families settle out of court rather than fight. But you don't have anything to lose by fighting, do you? Nothing at all, Clara said. The 2 weeks passed slowly. Clara stayed at the boarding house, helping the landlady with chores to offset the cost of the room. She washed dishes, swept floors, mended curtains. Simple work that kept her hands busy and her mind quiet. Cole disappeared for a few days. When he came back, he had a job lined up at a freight company. Hauling cargo, nothing glamorous, but steady work with steady pay. Thought I'd try that thing you mentioned, he said when Clara asked. Building something instead of running? How's it feel? Strange, but not bad. The hearing was set for a Thursday morning. Clara wore her best dress, the new one Brennan had bought her, and tried not to throw up from nerves. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Just the judge's bench, a few rows of seats, tables for the lawyers. Robert Vale sat at one table with his attorney, a sharp-dressed man who looked bored. Brennan sat at the other with Clara beside her. Judge Morrison was a stern-looking man in his 60s with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. He banged his gavel precisely at 9 o'clock. Court is now in session, case of Vale versus Vale, regarding the estate of Thomas James Vale, deceased. Ms. Brennan, you're representing the widow? I am, Your Honor. And you, Mr. Sterling, are representing Mr. Robert Vale? Correct, Your Honor. Then let's proceed. Miss Brennan, make your case. Brennan stood. For the next hour, she laid out everything: the suspicious timing of the second will, the compromised witnesses, the medical fraud, Marcus's death, Robert's convenient appearance. She presented the 9 statements from townspeople, showed the judge both wills side by side, pointing out the discrepancies in handwriting and language. She was methodical, precise, devastating. When she finished, Judge Morrison looked at Sterling. Your response? Sterling stood and made a half-hearted argument about legal standing and inheritance rights. But his heart wasn't in it. The evidence was too strong. Call your first witness, the judge said. Brennan called Clara. Clara walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like water. She swore to tell the truth and sat down. Mrs. Vale, Brennan began, in your own words, tell the court what happened after your husband died. Clara told the story, all of it. The ultimatum, the forged will, the escape, the chase. She didn't cry, didn't falter, just told the truth exactly as it had happened. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Sterling didn't even cross-examine. What could he ask? She'd laid out facts, not opinions. Brennan called 3 more witnesses: Henderson from the Mercantile, the land office clerk, and surprisingly, old Mrs. Fletcher, who testified reluctantly that, yes, Thomas had seemed perfectly sound when she'd seen him 2 weeks before his death. Then Brennan called Robert Vale himself. He took the stand looking confident. That confidence lasted about 5 minutes. Mr. Vale, Brennan said, when did you last see your cousin Marcus before his death? I hadn't seen him in years. Yet you knew about his death immediately? I read it in the newspaper. Interesting. Because according to the Silver Ridge newspaper, Marcus's death was reported on page 6 in a small column. Not exactly prominent. How did a man who hadn't seen his cousin in years happen to read that particular article? Robert shifted. I was looking for news from that area. Why? Personal interest. Or because you were already tracking Marcus's activities? Waiting for an opportunity? Brennan pulled out a paper. Is it true you've claimed inheritance rights to 4 other estates in the past 3 years under different names? Sterling stood. Objection? Relevance. Goes to credibility, Your Honor, Brennan said. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Vale. Robert's confidence crumbled. Those were legitimate claims. Were they? Because none of them held up in court. In fact, 3 resulted in fraud charges that you avoided by leaving the territory. Brennan walked closer to the witness stand. You're not Marcus's cousin, are you? You're just another con artist trying to steal from a widow. That's not true. Then provide proof of your relationship, birth records, family documents, anything. Robert couldn't, because he didn't have any. The hearing ended shortly after that. Judge Morrison said he'd review the evidence and issue a ruling within the week. Clara walked out of the courtroom feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Cole was waiting outside. How'd it go? Brennan destroyed him, completely destroyed him. Good. They went to a restaurant to celebrate. Actual celebration with real food and wine that Clara probably couldn't afford but ordered anyway. Because she'd stood up in court and told her story, and the judge had listened. Because she'd fought back, and it had mattered. The ruling came 5 days later. Brennan sent a messenger to the boarding house with the news. Clara read it twice to make sure she understood. The judge had ruled in her favor. The forged will was invalidated. Robert Vale's claim was dismissed with prejudice. The original will was reinstated. Everything Thomas had owned now legally belonged to Clara. She owned her life again. Clara sat on her bed holding the paper and cried, not from sadness, from relief so profound it felt like drowning in reverse, like finally breaking the surface after being underwater so long she'd forgotten what air tasted like. Cole found her like that an hour later. He read the ruling and smiled. "You did it. We did it. I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Sure you could have. You're stronger than you think." "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out." Clara wiped her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now you decide. Keep the land, sell it, burn it to the ground. It's yours. You get to choose." Clara thought about it. The house where she'd been happy and then trapped. The land Thomas had worked so hard to buy. The life that had been hers and then stolen and now was hers again. She didn't want it. "I'm going to sell," she said. "All of it. The house, the land, everything. And I'm going to use the money to help other women. Women like me who need a way out but don't have one." "How?" "I don't know yet, but Brennan will. She knows women who need help. I can fund travel, legal fees, whatever it takes to get them somewhere safe. Make sure they don't have to run alone like I did." Cole studied her face. "Sarah would have liked that. She would have liked you. I wish I could have known her." "Me too." Clara sold the property 3 weeks later. A young couple from back east bought it, newlyweds looking to build a life on the frontier. Clara wished them better luck than she'd had. The sale brought in enough money to keep Clara comfortable for years if she was careful. She wasn't planning to be careful. She rented a small office in Denver, 2 rooms above a dressmaker's shop. Put her name on the door, Clara Vale, Women's Advocacy. It wasn't a law office, she wasn't a lawyer, but she could connect women with lawyers like Brennan, could fund escapes for those who needed to run, could provide a safe place to stay while they figured out their next move. The first woman who came to her was running from a husband who beat her. Clara arranged passage to San Francisco and enough money to start over. The second was pregnant by a man who refused to acknowledge the child. Clara connected her with a family willing to help. Word spread. Within 6 months, Clara was helping 2 or 3 women a month. Women who came to her door desperate and scared and left with options they hadn't had before. It wasn't easy work. Some women went back to the situations they'd fled. Some disappeared without a trace. Some wrote letters months later saying thank you, saying they'd built new lives, saying Clara had saved them. Those letters made everything worthwhile. Cole stayed. He kept working at the freight company, but helped Clara in the evenings, coordinating travel, finding safe houses, occasionally intimidating men who tried to follow women to Denver. They fell into an easy rhythm, not romance. Neither of them was ready for that, but partnership, friendship. 2 people who'd been running and decided to stop, together. A year after the trial, Clara was in her office when someone knocked. She opened the door to find a young woman, maybe 19, with a black eye and a carpet bag. "Are you Mrs. Vale?" the girl asked. "Just Clara. Come in." The girl entered nervously. "My name's Rachel. A lady in Silver Ridge told me you help women who need to leave." "I need to leave." Clara gestured to a chair. "Tell me what happened." Rachel told her story. It was different from Clara's in details, but the same in structure. A man who thought he owned her, a trap with legal teeth, nowhere to go and no one to help. Clara listened. When Rachel finished, Clara said, "I can help you. I can get you on a train to California tomorrow. I know people there who will give you a place to stay while you find work. It won't be easy, but you'll be free." Rachel started crying. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." "Because someone helped me when I needed it, and because no woman should have to run alone." She arranged Rachel's escape that night. By morning, the girl was on a train heading west with money in her pocket and addresses of people who'd help. Clara stood on the platform watching the train disappear and felt something settle into place. This was what she was supposed to do. Not be Thomas's widow or Marcus's victim, or even just Clara Vale trying to survive. She was supposed to help others survive. Cole found her still standing there an hour later. "You all right?" he asked. "Better than all right. I think I finally figured out what I'm doing with my life." "Took you long enough?" She smiled. "Some things can't be rushed." They walked back through Denver together. The city had grown even in the year Clara had been there. More buildings, more people, more noise. But it felt like home in a way the ranch never quite had. Maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was just wherever you decided to stop running and start building. Clara opened her office and looked at the stack of letters on her desk. Requests for help, thank you notes, inquiries about her work. Each one a person who needed something she could provide. She sat down and started writing responses. 2 years after leaving her old life, Clara stood in front of a crowd at a women's meeting hall in Denver. She'd been asked to speak about her work, about helping women escape impossible situations. She was terrified, but she stood up anyway and told her story. The whole thing: Thomas's death, the forged will, the escape, the river, the trial. She told them about Sarah, about Marcus, about all the women who'd come through her door since. When she finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, the whole room was on their feet. Clara stood there overwhelmed, trying not to cry. These women understood. They'd lived versions of the same story. And they were celebrating not just her survival, but her choice to use it for something bigger. After the speech, women crowded around asking questions. How to help? Where to donate? Whether they could volunteer? Clara answered as best she could, still feeling like she was making this up as she went. Cole waited by the door until the crowd thinned. "You did good," he said when she finally escaped. "I was terrified." "Couldn't tell." They walked back through darkening streets. Denver at night was loud and bright and alive. Clara had stopped being scared of it. "I've been thinking," Cole said after a while. Dangerous habit. "About moving on. Not leaving Denver, but trying something different. There's a ranch outside the city looking for a foreman. Good pay, real work. I thought I might apply." Clara looked at him. "That sounds permanent." "Maybe it's time for permanent." "What changed?" He was quiet for a few steps. "You did. Watching you build this thing from nothing, watching you help people instead of just surviving, made me think maybe I could do something similar. Not the same, but something that matters. Running a ranch matters." "Yeah, but more than that. Sarah wanted to build something, and I've spent 3 years being angry that she never got to. Maybe it's time to build something for her, make the life she should have had count for something." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "She'd be proud of you. She'd be proud of both of us." They reached Clara's building. She lived above the office now, small apartment, barely furnished, but hers. "Cole," she said before he could leave, "thank you for everything. For getting me out, for staying, for all of it." "You already thanked me. About 100 times." "I know. But I need you to understand what it meant, what you did. You saved my life." "You saved your own life. I just drove the getaway wagon." Clara smiled. "Still, thank you." He tipped his hat. "Anytime." She watched him walk away, then climbed the stairs to her apartment. Inside, she lit a lamp and looked around at the life she'd built. Simple. Small. Hers. There was a letter waiting on her desk. Clara opened it and read. It was from a woman she'd helped 6 months ago. She'd made it to Oregon, found work as a teacher, met someone kind. She was getting married in the spring. She wanted Clara to know that she was happy, that she'd made it, that she was free. Clara set the letter down carefully and added it to the box where she kept all the others. Proof that what she was doing mattered. That running wasn't just about escaping. It was about getting somewhere worth being. She thought about the girl she'd been a few years ago, the one who'd opened her door to find Garrett with a forged will and Marcus's ultimatum. That girl had been terrified, trapped, certain she had no options. Clara wasn't that girl anymore. She was someone who'd run across the territory, crossed a raging river, stood up in court and fought for her right to exist on her own terms. Someone who'd taken that fight and turned it into something bigger, something that helped others fight their own battles. She was free. Not just legally, actually free. And freedom, Clara had learned, wasn't about running away from things. It was about running toward the life you chose for yourself. the life you built with your own hands from whatever pieces you had left. She blew out the lamp and went to bed. Outside, Denver hummed with life, and somewhere in the darkness, another woman was probably packing a bag, working up courage, deciding whether to run or stay. Clara hoped she'd run, and she hoped, when she did, she'd find her way to Denver, to a small office above a dressmaker's shop, to a woman who understood what it meant to escape, to Clara Vale, who'd learned the hard way that sometimes the only path to freedom ran straight through fear. But on the other side was everything worth fighting for. A life, a purpose, a future that belonged to no one but yourself. And that, Clara thought as she drifted off to sleep, was worth running for. Worth risking everything. Worth every terrifying, impossible, beautiful step of the journey. She'd made it, and she'd make sure others did too. For as long as they needed her, for as long as she could fight, for as long as there were women who needed to know that running wasn't giving up. It was surviving. And surviving was always, always worth it.